now we cross over to our Oh Soo-young for Global Insight and an in-depth look at important developments in world affairs.
Thanks very much, Morgan. It's time for Global Insight. Even after weeks of warning by Western governments that Russia was mobilising for an invasion of Ukraine, the world still watched in disbelief as Vladmir Putin recognised the independence of two breakaway regions in eastern Ukraine and sent in what he called peacekeeping troops. Countries around the world have strongly criticised the move at the United Nations Security Council, saying that Moscow has breached international law. Beginning with the US, they have begun slapping stronger sanctions on the Kremlin. Russia, however, has slammed the US and the West for cramming weapons into Ukraine and called on Kyiv to drop its NATO bid. To discuss the latest developments, we connect with political geographer Gerard Toal, who is a professor in the School of Public and International Affairs at Virginia Tech and also author of Critical Geopolitics, Bosnia, Remade and Near Abroad. A very warm welcome to you, Professor. Thanks for joining us again.
Happy to chat with you. I wish we were talking about a happier subject than this one, but it's a crisis that we need to address.
These unfortunate circumstances do bring us together, but nevertheless, it's lovely to see you, Professor. And, well, could you begin by telling us a little bit about the two regions at the centre of the current crisis?
Sure. I think it's important that people get a sense of the regions of Donetsk and Luhansk, and they are two eastern Ukrainian regions that were at the center of the revolt against Kyiv in 2014. There were reasons why they were alienated from the Maidan revolution. They have a strong regional identity. There were major economic concerns that people had there. So there were anti-Maidan demonstrations in these areas. But the really key thing that happened is that a series of really outside forces from Russia came in and sort of promoted this idea of a Russian spring, took over the municipalities because there was a power vacuum. Essentially, the Ukrainian president, that was his power base, the Ukrainian President Yanukovych, who had fled, that was his power base. And there was his party of regions controlled that area. When he fled, there was a power vacuum, and these groups moved into that area, and they were able to successfully ignite a war there. And as a consequence, once violence got going, then things polarized really quite quickly. And you have this very, very unfortunate division where essentially in these two oblasts, 1/3 of them is controlled by these Russian-backed separatists that are effectively proxies for Russia's foreign policy. And 2/3 are controlled by Kyiv, by the Ukrainian government.
And Professor, you've done public opinion research in these regions very recently. What do people there actually think?
Well, it's a very good question, and actually my colleagues and I are going to be presenting the results of a major survey that we organized there in January, 4,000 respondents on both sides of the line. There are the divisions, as you might expect. The areas that are controlled by the Russian-backed separatists have aspirations to join Russia, although there are nuances which we will present tomorrow when we unveil this research. But I think the main thing that people need to grasp is that both sides are very alike in that in one sense, geopolitical tension and geopolitical divide has been imposed upon them. And so we ask this question, it doesn't matter what country I live in, all as I want is a good job and then a good pension. We ask people, do they agree with that question or not? And majorities on both sides of the line agree with that. So in one sense, what you have here is an economic, really an economic crisis, an area that's been previously was an industrial powerhouse that has fallen on hard times, and then a war really cratered the economy. And as a consequence, there's a lot of people caught in the middle. And they did not ask for this war. They want peace, but they're caught up in this larger geopolitical game.
And well, Putin's recognition of these breakaway states, they seem to some to be quite reminiscent of Hitler's takeover of Sudetenland. And well, does all of this mean war, or that Ukraine is actually being invaded?
Well, yeah, I would stay away from Hitler analogies because I don't think they necessarily help in this particular case. Effectively, what you have at this particular moment is a transition in Russia's theory of how it is going to achieve its end. And that theory was through the Minsk process, whereby they would use these territories as levers within the polity of Ukraine to make sure that Ukraine did not have a geopolitical orientation towards the West, that it did not join NATO. So these were levers that were going to be used, and the Minsk process was part of that. The transition now is effectively with the recognition of these territories as independent states by the Russian state. They've abandoned that strategy. And that is very scary because, for two reasons. First of all, these particular territories claim territory larger than they actually control. Remember I said that they control 1/3 of Donetsk and Luhansk? Well, they claim it all. And so one of the things to look out for is whether the Kremlin is going to back them taking all of those oblasts. In other words, they're going to break out from the current line of control, and they're going to at least seize these two particular territories. That means war, and that is a very, very serious situation.
Well, in response to Russia recognizing these two separatist states, Biden ordered sanctions on the regions, on these eastern regions of Ukraine after Putin's decree, and Germany has finally decided to halt operations surrounding Nord Stream 2. Do you think any of these measures are going to carry enough bite, though?
No, I don't. We saw the speech yesterday. It was a speech of a man who has been in power for over 2 decades. It's full of grievances, resentments, there's anger, and I think it was a dark speech, and it is one that I think augurs poorly for peace going forward. I think that Vladimir Putin is thinking about that he has a mission, which is to sort of rearrange the territory of Ukraine, because he sees that as a way to secure Russia, which is, of course, extremely debatable, but that's his particular vision. And there's a historical legacy here, that this is something that he feels that now is the time to strike. He's got escalation dominance. Ukraine is not in NATO. Ukraine is relatively isolated, and he's going to push through. And so when you're in that particular mode of thinking, you're not really open to persuasion with economic measures, because that's not significant relative to your historic mission.
And well, Western countries fear that Putin's recognition of these two states marked just the beginning of his overall plan to invade Ukraine or to make territorial claims over the country. And well, in terms of that, what do you think will be the Russian president's next steps, or what kind of scenarios do you think the West and the rest of the global community should really prepare for?
Well, I think that the Biden administration has been doing a really excellent job in sort of pre-buttal, anticipating the particular scenarios that are going to be used. So the charge of genocide, for example, that Ukraine is initiating genocide against the people of the Donbass, is one that we've heard before. It's that whole rhetoric of responsibility to protect has actually been a staple of interventions from Bosnia and Kosovo. And some have argued that effectively what President Putin is going to do is he's going to replay the Kosovo script that the West used. He's going to replay that in Ukraine. But of course, in Kosovo's case, there was a real massive attack and displacement of defenseless people. In the case of the Donbass, empirically, that's just not the case. The evidence is just not there. However, when you have control over the media, you have the ability to sort of create a particular script, create a scenario, create the kind of footage of women and children in order to inflame emotions amongst the audience. The key question, and this is a question I don't know the answer to, but the key question is, will the Russian people buy into this? Will they see it as a legitimate war? The Crimea was different. Crimea, there was an emotional attachment to Crimea. The Donbass, I'm not so sure that this is going to work. We'll just have to see. I mean, media is extremely powerful, and when you're sort of broadcasting that, you can certainly move a significant segment of the population. But there's also a danger here for the Putin administration. This may be a war that people just don't buy into.
Well, for now, it seems that Washington, the European Union, and NATO seem to be trying to maybe downplay the situation, while the United Kingdom, some of their officials have actually called this an act of invasion. Why is it that some of these states seem to be trying to downplay the situation at the moment? Well,
okay, so you need to grasp that. So what has happened right now is that we are at the sort of first step of potentially dangerous escalatory ladder. The Russian forces have not gone across the line of control that was agreed at Minsk. So now it has changed in as much as Russia has recognized these as independent states. It signed a friendship treaty with these states, and therefore it said it's going to put its troops there. It's going to establish military bases there. The big question is, therefore, is it going to go, like I said, going to go beyond that line of control? So there was some dispute as to whether this is an invasion or not, because a lot of Western analysts knew that there were already troops of Russia in this particular area. And so in one sense, this is a sort of a shell game in which there's a certain formality which is disguised as a reality that's always been there. So this is the first step. We just have to see what happens. You could argue that this may not escalate, that there's a way in which we're just at a new situation, and if Russia decides to kind of pause it, then it need not necessarily go to the next ladder step. But all the signs are, unfortunately, as if it is going to go to the next step, and that's really what's very scary to a lot of people.
And do you think Vladimir Putin is willing to risk war or go to war, really, over this?
Yeah, all the indications are that he is, yes. I mean, you can make an argument that he is a strategic mastermind. Some people, realists in the US, have made this argument. I don't buy it, but that he's a strategic mastermind, and therefore he is bluffing up until the point of actual potentially crossing over into so-called kinetic technical measures. In other words, bombing people and killing Ukrainians and seizing Ukrainian territory, more Ukrainian territory. I think that, however, that if this evidence from the speech yesterday indicates that this is someone who is really sort of set on war, and there was a punitiveness to the speech yesterday that I think took some analysts by surprise, and that doesn't bode well.
Well, I suppose we'll have to wait and see what happens. Though, as you said, all the signs do seem to be pointing towards invasion. Hopefully there will be a diplomatic solution that's available. But, well, this is where we'll end the interview today. That was Gerard Toal, Professor in the School of Public and International Affairs at Virginia Tech. Thank you again so much for your time.
Oh, thank you.